They were found the morning after the storm, huddled beneath a broken wagon near Dry Hollow Creek. 5 children, stiff with cold, their skin touched by frostbite, the youngest barely breathing. No names, no coats thick enough. Just a bloodied scrap of paper with the word forgive scrawled in a shaking hand. Martha didn't cry when she saw them. She just knelt in the snow, lifting one child at a time, setting them in the back of her wagon. The mare shifted nervously, steam rising from her back, but didn't protest. Maybe the animal understood something unspoken like sorrow, knowing its own kind. The baby was near blue, his lips barely parting for breath. Martha unwrapped her own shawl, pulled him against her chest, and whispered prayers she hadn't spoken. Since her husband went under the earth 3 winters back, she'd buried silence with him. But this morning the world demanded sound, the rustle of straw, the creak of wheels, the soft gasps of half-frozen mouths trying to remember life. She turned the wagon toward her land. No one saw her pass. The town stayed shuttered after the storm, and even if they had seen, most would have looked away. They remembered her by her maiden name now, not as Widow Carson, but as the girl who married too quick, lost too much, and never smiled again. Her cabin sat miles from the nearest church bell. Wind slipped through the gaps in the wood, and the stove had to be fed every hour. But the roof held, and she had enough beans and lard to last the week. That was enough. It had to be. She moved quietly, one boot in front of the other, setting up cots by the stove, pressing cloths to cheeks, cutting strips from old dresses to wrap tiny feet. The children didn't speak. They watched her with the wide eyes of animals that had seen fire. The oldest girl, maybe 10, held the others like a sentinel. Her hands were cracked and her hair matted with ice, but she met Martha's gaze without blinking. "You can sleep," Martha said gently. "They're warm now." But the girl didn't move, didn't even flinch when Martha reached to touch her shoulder. Later, when the wind picked up again and night crept down the hills, Martha sat in the rocking chair, the baby asleep on her chest. The wood creaked and snapped. The fire cast slow-moving shadows across the floor, soft and long like memories. She didn't know their names, she didn't ask where they came from, but something inside her stirred, something old, bruised, and not yet dead. She didn't sleep that night. The baby stirred now and then, a weak cry like wind through broken glass. The others turned under their blankets, lost in fever dreams. Only the eldest girl remained watchful, her eyes fixed on the shadows, as if expecting someone or something to come through the door. Taut Martha stayed by the fire, her hands, worn and calloused, moved without thought. She rubbed salve into cracked skin, turned damp boots to dry by the stove, crushed fever bark for tea. She moved like a woman used to being unseen, like someone who'd built her life around silence. They didn't know her story. They didn't know about the spring flood that took her boy, or the pneumonia that clung to James like a jealous ghost, stealing his breath inch by inch. They didn't know about the letters she never mailed, or the Bible she kept closed on the shelf, too tired to believe. The land had taken more than it gave, but Martha stayed, because staying was all she knew. At sunrise, the snow had hardened to a crust. The hills sparkled like a dream she didn't believe in. Smoke lifted from the chimney in a single, trembling line. Inside, the children lay still, their small chests rising and falling. One of the boys, no older than 6, whimpered in his sleep and reached blindly across the cot. Martha took his hand and held it until he calmed. She went outside, eyes stinging from the cold. Her boots crunched through ice as she walked to the barn, past the orchard trees, leafless still holding the memory of last autumn's fruit. In the barn she found old quilts and a saddle blanket to bring back. She paused by the stall where James's mare used to stand. The stall was empty now. She let her hand rest on the worn beam, thumb grazing the notches he used to carve when he was drunk and trying to forget. Back at the house, the girl was standing now, barefoot, arms crossed, chin lifted in quiet defiance. Martha nodded toward the fire. "You don't have to fight me," she said. "I ain't here to hurt you." The girl didn't answer, but she sat. Martha made a thin porridge and sweetened it with a spoon of molasses. The youngest, a tow-headed boy with eyes too large for his face, smiled at the taste and leaned into her arm. The baby, now wrapped tight against her chest, had taken milk from a rag soaked in goat's cream. He wouldn't meet her gaze, but he breathed easier. Martha remembered a hymn her mother used to sing, something about mercy falling like rain. She didn't hum it, but the rhythm stayed in her bones as she moved through the day, patching clothes, warming water, listening to the wind slide beneath the door. That evening, when the girl finally spoke, her voice was dry as tinder. "They left us." Martha didn't ask who, didn't ask why. She just placed her hand on the girl's back, light as a whisper. "I know," she said. Outside, the wind had stilled. The night fell slow and soft, like a blanket pulled over the eyes of the world. He rode in 3 days later, just after sundown, with the sky burning behind him in streaks of rust and ash. Dust clung to his coat, and the horse moved like it had traveled far without pause. He didn't dismount at first, just sat still in the saddle, eyes on the chimney smoke rising from Martha's cabin. She heard the hooves before she saw him. Her hands went instinctively to the shotgun resting behind the door, but she didn't reach for it. Not yet. The children watched from the corners of the room, quiet as breath. The girl stood in front of them again, jaw set. Martha stepped past her, opened the door slowly, and met the rider's gaze. He was older than he looked. Or maybe it was the dust and silence that aged him. His beard was patchy, his eyes too sharp for comfort. But there was something in the way he held the reins, not tight, not loose, just steady. Like a man who no longer hoped for anything, but still kept showing up. "I heard there were children, left for dead out by Dry Hollow," he said. His voice was low, rough like gravel under boot. "Folks in town say you took them in." Martha didn't answer right away. The baby stirred against her chest. Wind rustled through the bare cottonwoods. "Are you looking to take them?" she asked. He shook his head once. "No, ma'am." She waited. "So did he." Then finally, she opened the door wider. "You hungry?" He nodded, dismounted without a word, and followed her inside. He didn't ask questions, just removed his hat, sat by the fire, and accepted the plate she handed him. The children kept their distance. The girl never sat after supper. He helped carry in a fresh bucket of water without being asked. When the boy's cough returned in the night, the stranger was already by his side, lifting him gently, murmuring something too soft to catch. In the morning, he chopped wood like it was the only thing keeping his hands from shaking. Martha watched him from the porch. Her shawl clung to her shoulders, damp from the mist. The trees creaked in the cold. She didn't ask what haunted him. She saw it in the way he touched nothing too long, in how he looked past the children, not at them, but beyond, like he was measuring what it might cost to care again. He spoke little, only what was necessary. But his silences didn't feel cruel, just old, tired. By the third evening, the baby had stopped wheezing. The boy with the fever was strong enough to sit near the fire. The girl still guarded them like a soldier, but her eyes no longer darted toward the door. The stranger sat on the steps carving something small from a block of wood. His knife moved slow, careful, as if the shape inside mattered more than time. Martha brought him coffee and sat beside him. They didn't speak. Inside, the children laughed for the first time, a thin, startled sound, almost shy. The man looked up just briefly, then went back to carving. He didn't smile, but he didn't leave. By the fifth morning, frost no longer gathered on the inside of the windows. The stove held its warmth longer. The air still bit at the skin, but something softer had begun to move through the cabin. Not quite peace, but the memory of it. The stranger, he told them his name was Elias. Nothing more repaired the broken hinge on the barn door without being asked. When the youngest boy dropped the water pail and began to cry, Elias crouched beside him, lifted the boy's hand, and blew warmth into it like a promise. He never asked the children where they'd come from. Neither did Martha. She watched him from the porch, her fingers wrapped around a tin mug, long gone cold. His coat, frayed at the seams, hung heavy off his shoulders. She noticed he slept near the door each night, boots always within reach, as if part of him expected to run. The girl, still protective, began to follow Elias with her eyes. Not out of distrust anymore, but something closer to suspicion laced with hope. When he handed her a bowl of stew one night, she took it without a word, but she ate every last spoonful. The cabin grew smaller with all of them inside it, yet no one complained. Elias mended the roof patch by patch. Martha worked at night, stitching blankets from scraps, her needle moving with quiet urgency. They never spoke of the future. Out beyond the hills, the snow melted in strips beneath the cottonwoods. The creek ran louder. One morning, Elias stood ankle-deep in the icy water, fixing a snare. When he looked up, Martha was on the ridge above, her dress flaring in the wind, a basket on her hip. Their eyes met, held. He nodded once. She nodded back. That night she found him whittling again by lamplight. He had carved a horse, small and smooth, the kind a boy might hold in his palm. He didn't offer it to anyone, just set it on the shelf near the fire and went to bed. Later the girl took it, held it close, slept with it under her arm. By the end of the week, Martha's hens were laying again. The children fed them each morning, laughter chasing the chickens in small bursts. Martha watched the baby try to sit up on his own and felt something tighten in her chest, not pain, but the memory of it uncoiling. She found herself humming again while washing clothes in the stream, a sound without words, full of the ache of old hymns. That evening, as dusk settled over the land like a quilt, Elias sat with her on the steps once more. The sky was pink with the kind of light that only shows up when nothing's burning. "You have family?" she asked quietly. He didn't look at her. "Not anymore," he said. She nodded, as if that explained everything, and maybe it did. Inside, the children slept. One snored softly. The baby's fingers twitched in a dream. Elias stayed outside until the moon rose, watching the horizon like he'd done for years. But his knife was still . It was the sound of hooves that broke the calm mid-morning. Under a pale sun, the air still sharp with thawing frost, Elias was by the barn, sharpening a blade. Martha stood in the orchard with the girl, collecting fallen branches. The children played quietly near the porch, stacking stones like they meant to build something that would last. Then came the riders. 3 Men, dressed to clean for this part of the country, their coats lined with fur, rifles slung lazy across their shoulders. They rode with the posture of men who owned land and weren't used to being told no. Martha went still. The girl dropped her basket, stepped backward until she was nearly behind her. Elias didn't move. He watched from the barn, eyes narrowed, thumb resting on the edge of his knife. The man in front, heavyset with slicked-back hair and pale eyes, tipped his hat as if the gesture still meant something. "Mornin', ma'am. We're looking for some runaways." 5 children. Belonged to a man named Randall Teague. "Mean anything to you?" Martha said nothing. The girl behind her clenched her jaw, eyes locked on the lead rider. "They was headed this way. Fella in town said you might have seen M. You'd remember one of M's real small. Suckles on a bit of cloth, I heard. Sad business there. PA's been beside himself." Martha didn't blink. They weren't left. They were discarded. The rider smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That, maybe, but Randall's got paper. Says he owns M. Law, don't argue with the signature." Elias stepped forward now, quiet, steady. His boots sank into the soft mud as he walked. He didn't raise his voice. "That law don't hold here." The man turned toward him, amused. "And who are you?" The woman's hired hand. Elias didn't answer, just kept walking until he was beside Martha. His hand rested at his belt, not on the gun. "Not yet. You got no right," Martha said. Her voice didn't shake. "Ma'am," the man replied, "you're harboring property. That puts you on the wrong side of things." The girl moved closer to Martha, her thin frame trembling with a fury too large for her body. "They ain't going nowhere," Elias said. The man's face changed then, a small shift, the kind that speaks of violence long practiced. He nudged his horse forward, slow and deliberate. Elias stepped between him and the children. "We'll be back," the man said. "With the sheriff, if need be. Randall's coming too. You'll want to think real hard about what side you're on when he gets here." They turned and rode off, leaving silence in their wake, thick and bitter inside. The children huddled close. The youngest had begun to cry. Martha knelt beside them, touching each head, each back, as if counting them with her hands. Elias closed the door and leaned against it. His jaw was tight. He looked at Martha. "Sheriff won't side with us," he said. "I know. We'll have to fight." "I know that too." Outside, the wind had picked up again, tugging at the trees. Clouds gathered low over the hills. The cabin, once a shelter, now felt like a line drawn in the dust, but no one spoke of leaving. That night, Elias began to dig. A trench along the north edge of the cabin, reinforced the windows, checked the rifle more than once. Martha stayed up with him, oiling the old revolver James left behind. Though her hands trembled, the girl watched from the shadows. They weren't ready, but they weren't running either. They came at dawn just as the frost turned the grass brittle underfoot. Randall Teague rode in at the center of 5 men, his coat lined in fox, boots polished like someone who never bent to mud. His eyes scanned the cabin as if it was something beneath him, a shack, a stain, a thing to be corrected. The sheriff rode beside him, older now, slower, but still wearing the tin star like it meant something holy. He didn't look at Martha, didn't speak to Elias, just nodded once toward the house and muttered, "Let's make it clean." Elias stood in front of the porch, rifle held low but ready. Martha was beside him, her hair tied back, sleeves rolled, revolver at her waist. Randall dismounted with a grunt, walked forward, his hands open like some gentleman from a dying play. "Those kids are mine," he said, loud enough for the whole land to hear. "Signed and paid for. Church saw it. Judge stamped it." Elias didn't move. "You left them to die." Randall laughed. "That's opinion. Law's got no use for feelings." Martha stepped forward then, just one step, her voice steady. "They're not going back." The sheriff shifted in his saddle. "Widow Carson, I'ma skin you plain. Don't make this worse than it needs to be." "You made it worse the day you looked away," she said. Randall's smile vanished. He moved fast, reaching for the youngest boy behind Elias, but the girl moved faster. She stepped between them, arms out, eyes blazing. "You ain't touching him." Randall raised his hand, palm open. Elias raised the rifle. "Touch her," he said, "and I'll bury you myself." The wind stilled. The sheriff's horse snorted. Nobody moved. Then Randall lowered his hand. Not out of fear, out of calculation. "You'll hang for this," he spat. "Maybe," Elias said, "but not today." The sheriff sighed, removed his hat, and looked at the ground. "This ain't a fight worth having." Randall turned to him. "You swore you'd." "I swore to the law," the sheriff cut in, voice dry as old rope, "and I see no law here that says a man owns a child." Randall's face burned red, but he didn't draw, not with 5 children watching, not with a rifle aimed at his heart. He turned back to his horse, climbed on, and rode off without another word. The others followed. The sheriff lingered. He looked at Martha long and sad. "I won't come back here," he said, "but you best be ready if someone else does." Martha nodded. "I've been ready since the day I buried my son." He tipped his hat once, then rode into the dust. When they were gone, no one spoke. Elias lowered the rifle. Martha turned, lifted the little boy in her arms, held him close. The girl sat down on the steps, her face unreadable. Later that night, as the moon crept high and the wind softened again. The baby reached out from his blanket and touched Elias's boot. He didn't notice at first. Then the girl picked up the boy's hand and placed it in Elias. "Say thank you," she whispered. That the boy looked up. "Pa," he said. The word hung in the room like something sacred. Elias blinked, looked to Martha, then to the fire. He didn't cry, but something broke open behind his eyes and it didn't close again. The days that followed came slow, as if the land itself were exhaling. The threat was gone, but its echo stayed in the way Elias kept checking the horizon, in how Martha sat longer by the window at dusk, her hands idle, listening. The children no longer clung to shadows. The girl, though still wary, had begun to help without being asked, gathering eggs, brushing the mare, fetching kindling. Sometimes Elias would pass her a tool or steady her hand, and neither would speak, but both would nod, like two parts of the same story learning how to finish a sentence together. The boy who had called Elias Pa now followed him through the fields, mimicking his stride, holding twigs like rifles. At night, he curled close to him near the fire, falling asleep with his face tucked into Elias's coat. Martha mended the doorframe, humming songs with no words, just sound and memory. The porch, once splintered and bowed, began to hold weight. Again she planted onions by the window, and the green shoots pushed through faster than expected. Spring always came late in these parts, but this year it didn't feel so cruel. The girl took to reading from a torn Bible left on the shelf, sounding out words in a whisper. One afternoon she asked Martha what mercy meant. "It means you deserve the cold," Martha said gently, "but someone lit a fire anyway." Elias didn't speak of that morning again, nor of the rifle, nor the word the boy had given him. But he built a second bunk in the loft, just enough space for 5 small bodies and a dog if one ever came. He said it was for when the cabin got crowded. They began calling it home without meaning to. One night, Martha stepped out under the stars. "He won't be back," she said. "I know. You ever think about going? Every day." She waited. "But I don't," he said. The moon was high, pale and silent. Somewhere near the ridge, an owl called once. Then again, she moved beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "They're healing," she said. "So are we," he answered. She turned toward him, searching his face. "You lost someone too," he nodded. "My wife. The fever took our girl too. And now, I don't know what this is," he admitted. "It doesn't have to be anything," she said. "It just has to be real." He looked at her then, really looked, and the silence between them softened. Inside, the fire crackled. The girl whispered a prayer for the first time. The boy with the cough no longer woke in the night. The walls, once thin and tired, now held the breath of 7 lives, learning how to stay. By late spring, the snow had become a memory, which is patches along the ridge, slow to melt, like old grief refusing to leave all at once. The orchard bloomed quietly. Small, pale blossoms clung to twisted branches, opening without fanfare. The children watched them from the porch, their faces tilted toward the sun, eyes half closed. For the first time, they did not flinch when a rider passed the road. The girl no longer stood guard at the door. Instead, she helped Martha stitch a new curtain for the window. Blue cloth, faded but clean, fluttered in the breeze, softening the light that poured across the floor. Elias spent more time inside now. He carved less, listened more, read aloud from the girl's Bible when her voice grew tired. The baby laughed, often sharp, sudden bursts that startled even him. Once Elias laughed back, quiet and low. The sound surprised them both. They began calling her Ma. Not all at once, not even out loud at first, but it slipped into the way the children looked at her, into how their hands found hers when they passed her the bucket or crawled into her lap without asking. She never corrected them. She built a swing between 2 trees. The boy who once coughed blood now flew through the air on a rope seat, shouting as loud as thunder. Elias pushed him higher each time. One morning the girl brought Martha a flower, just a wild thing, yellow, bent at the stem. She placed it on the table like an offering. "I'm not scared anymore," she whispered. Martha looked at her, then down at the flower. "You don't have to be," she said. At night, when the lamp burned low and the fire settled into glowing breath, Elias would sit in the rocking chair, the baby asleep against his chest. Martha would watch him from the table, her hands resting idle, for the first time in years. Outside the stars hung low, thick as seed and spring. Inside, the cabin never echoed with silence again. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button so more people can be inspired. Share in the comments which moment moved you the most. And if you believe in the power of transformation, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story that could change your perspective on life.